The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, carried by a ship that looked like a floating crystal. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the communication center of Luna Station, watching the alien vessel hover outside Earth's atmosphere. Its surface sparkled with colors that had no names in any human language. "They're requesting immediate communication," said Lieutenant Rodriguez, his fingers dancing across the control panel. "Universal Translator is online." Sarah nodded. She had been Earth's chief diplomat for 15 years, but this was her first contact with the Galactic Council. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 3 years ago. Now it seemed the galaxy had finally noticed them. The screen flickered to life. A tall, thin creature appeared, its skin pale blue and its eyes like black pearls. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes. "Greetings, primitive species of the third planet," the alien said. "I am Speaker Veltar of the Galactic Council. Your world has been observed. Your species has been judged ready for integration into our great alliance." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. Primitive species. She forced herself to smile. "Hello, Speaker Veltar. I'm Ambassador Sarah Chen, representing the United Earth government. We're honored by your visit." "Honor is not required," Veltar replied. "Only obedience. The Galactic Council has ruled over this galaxy for 5,000 of your years. Every intelligent species bows before our wisdom. Now it is your turn." The alien's words carried weight like stones dropping into still water. Sarah could feel the tension rising in the room behind her. The other diplomats and military officers were listening to every word. "What exactly are you asking of us?" Sarah asked carefully. Not asking. Commanding. Veltar's black eyes seemed to grow larger. "You will send representatives to Nexus Prime, our capital world. There you will perform the ritual of submission. You will kneel before the Supreme Arbiter and swear the oath of subservience. Your species will join the Council as a junior member, following our laws and paying tribute." Sarah blinked. "And if we refuse?" For a moment, Veltar looked confused, as if the question made no sense. Refuse? No species refuses the Council. It would be like refusing gravity or the passage of time. Impossible. "But hypothetically," Sarah pressed, "what if we said no? Then your species would be declared hostile," Veltar said, his voice now cold as space. "Your worlds would be blockaded. Your ships would be destroyed. Your people would suffer until they learned wisdom. But this will not happen because you are not fools." The screen went dark. Through the observation windows, Sarah watched the crystal ship turn and disappear in a flash of light. General Martinez stepped forward from the group of observers. His weathered face was grim. "That sounded like a threat, Ambassador." "It was," Sarah replied. "A very clear one." She turned to face the room full of Earth's best diplomatic and military minds. "Get me everything we know about this Galactic Council. I want to know who they are, what they want, and how they've stayed in power for 5,000 years." The next 3 weeks were a blur of research and preparation. Earth's intelligence network, still new to galactic politics, worked around the clock. What they discovered was troubling. The Galactic Council was exactly what it claimed to be, the rulers of the galaxy. 12 ancient species had formed an alliance millennia ago, and they had been expanding ever since. Every species they encountered was given the same choice: submit or be destroyed. According to the records they could access, no species had ever chosen destruction. The Council's fleet was massive. Their technology advanced beyond measure. They ruled not through love or respect, but through fear and overwhelming force. Dr. Elizabeth Park, Earth's leading xenobiologist, presented her findings to the emergency session of the Global Security Council. "They're not evil," she said, her voice echoing in the underground bunker beneath the Swiss Alps. "At least they don't see themselves that way. To them, this is natural order. The strong rule the weak, the advanced guide the primitive. They genuinely believe they're helping us." President Chen, no relation to Ambassador Sarah Chen, leaned forward in his chair. "And the species that have joined them?" "Thriving according to their own propaganda," Dr. Park replied. "Safe, protected, guided by the wisdom of their betters. Of course, they're also completely controlled. No independent military, no independent government, no independent thought." The room fell silent. Finally, General Martinez spoke. "So we have a choice: become slaves or be destroyed." "Those seem to be the options," Dr. Park agreed. Ambassador Chen stood up. "No," she said firmly. "Those are the options they're giving us. But humans have never been good at accepting other people's choices. 3 days later, Sarah Chen and her diplomatic team boarded the Earthship Defiance and set course for Nexus Prime. The journey took 2 weeks through hyperspace, following coordinates provided by the Council. As they dropped out of hyperspace near Nexus Prime, Sarah had to admit the sight was impressive. The world was a perfect sphere of blue and green, surrounded by massive space stations and orbital platforms. Ships moved between them like schools of fish, following invisible currents of traffic. Incoming transmission, reported Communications Officer Kim. They're directing us to Docking Bay 7 of the primary diplomatic station. Follow their instructions, Sarah ordered. For now. The diplomatic station was huge, easily the size of a small moon. As their ship settled into the assigned bay, Sarah could see other vessels docked nearby. Each ship was different, representing dozens of alien species she had never seen before. All these different races, whispered Dr. Harrison, the team's cultural specialist, all here to submit to the Council. Or all here because they already have, Sarah replied. They were met at the airlock by another blue-skinned alien, this one wearing robes that seemed to be made of living light. Welcome, humans, it said in perfect English. I am Guide Morthak. I will escort you to your quarters and explain the ceremony. As they walked through corridors filled with breathtaking art and impossible architecture, Morthak began his explanation. The ritual of submission is simple, he said, his robes shifting from blue to gold as he spoke. Tomorrow you will be brought before the Supreme Arbiter and the full Council of 12. You will approach the throne of judgment. When commanded, you will kneel and place your hands on the ground. You will then recite the oath of subservience in your native language. And what does this oath say? Sarah asked. The words are ancient and sacred, Morthak replied. You pledge your species' loyalty to the Council. You acknowledge their authority over your world and your people. You promise to obey their laws and serve their interests. In return, you receive protection and guidance. They reached their quarters, a luxurious suite with windows overlooking the planet below. As the door closed behind them, Dr. Harrison immediately began scanning for listening devices. Clean, he whispered after a few minutes. Sarah gathered her team around the central table. Opinions? They're confident, said Lieutenant Rodriguez. Maybe overconfident. They've done this so many times they don't even consider the possibility of resistance. The other species we saw on the way here, added Dr. Harrison. Did you notice their body language? Heads down, shoulders slumped. They looked defeated. Sarah nodded. Broken spirits. Generations of submission. She looked around at her team. I want to be clear about something. I didn't come here to kneel to anyone. Earth didn't send us here to make humanity into pets. What are you thinking, Ambassador? Asked Lieutenant Rodriguez. Sarah smiled, but there was steel in her eyes. I'm thinking tomorrow is going to be very interesting. Outside their windows, the lights of Nexus Prime twinkled like stars. Ships continued their endless dance between the orbital platforms. And somewhere in the vast diplomatic station, representatives of dozens of species prepared for another day of serving their masters. But none of them knew that tomorrow, for the first time in 5,000 years, someone was going to say no. The morning of the ceremony arrived with artificial sunlight streaming through the massive windows of the diplomatic station. Sarah Chen stood before the mirror in her quarters, adjusting her formal diplomatic uniform. The dark blue fabric bore the simple emblem of United Earth, a circle containing all the continents with no borders drawn between nations. Ambassador, Dr. Harrison called from the main room. They're here. Sarah took one last look at herself. In a few hours, she would either make history or start a war. Possibly both. Guide Morthak waited in the corridor with 6 other aliens. These wore armor instead of robes, and their eyes were the flat black of professional soldiers. It is time, Morthak said. The Council awaits. They walked through corridors that grew more elaborate with each step. The walls showed moving pictures of great moments in Council history, species after species kneeling before the Golden Throne. The message was clear. This was how things were done. This was how they had always been done. Beautiful artwork, Sarah commented, nodding toward a scene of bird-like creatures prostrating themselves before the Council. The Kethmori submission 300 years ago, Morthak replied proudly. They fought the longest before seeing wisdom. 12 years of war before they learned to kneel. How many died? Dr. Harrison asked quietly. Numbers are unimportant, Morthak said. What matters is that they learned. The corridor opened into a vast chamber that took Sarah's breath away. The ceiling stretched up so high it was lost in shadows. Balconies lined the walls on multiple levels, filled with alien observers. At the far end, 12 thrones rose like a mountain of metal and crystal. But what struck Sarah most were the other diplomatic delegations scattered throughout the chamber, dozens of different species all standing with their heads bowed and their shoulders hunched. The posture of defeat. The other species wait their turn to renew their oaths, Morthak explained. It is done monthly, to remind all of their proper place. In the center of the chamber stood a golden circle carved into the floor. Above it, the 12 thrones held 12 very different beings. Sarah could see the blue-skinned Veltar among them, but the others were shapes she had never imagined. One looked like living crystal. Another seemed to be made of shifting metal. A third appeared to be nothing but floating energy in a vaguely humanoid shape. The largest throne in the center held a being that hurt to look at directly. It seemed to be made of pure light, constantly shifting between different colors and intensities. This had to be the Supreme Arbiter. Humans of Earth, the Arbiter's voice boomed through the chamber like thunder. Approach the circle of judgment. Sarah walked forward, her team falling into step behind her. She could feel thousands of alien eyes watching. As they reached the golden circle, she noticed something that chilled her blood. The floor inside the circle was worn smooth by countless knees. Kneel, the Arbiter commanded. Sarah remained standing. Behind her, she heard Dr. Harrison and Lieutenant Rodriguez do the same. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the station's systems. Kneel, the Arbiter repeated, its voice harder now. No, Sarah said clearly. The words seemed to echo forever in the vast space. Shocked chittering and gasps arose from the observing species. Several of the council members leaned forward on their thrones. The crystal being, which Sarah guessed was HFY from the briefing materials, spoke in a voice like breaking glass. Perhaps the translation was unclear. You are commanded to kneel and recite the oath of subservience. The translation was perfect, Sarah replied, and my answer is still no. HFY's form pulsed with brighter light. No species refuses the council. No species has ever refused the council. Well, Sarah said with a slight smile, there's a first time for everything. The Supreme Arbiter rose from its throne, its form blazing with angry light. You dare to defy the will of the council? You dare to stand before your betters as equals? I stand before you as a representative of humanity, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. We serve no masters, we bow to no one. We are not your subjects, and we never will be. The chamber erupted in chaos. Alien voices rose in dozens of different languages. Some of the observing species looked terrified. Others, Sarah noticed with satisfaction, looked curious, even hopeful. Silence, the Arbiter roared, and the chamber fell quiet again. Human, you do not understand the gravity of your situation. The Council has ruled this galaxy for 5,000 years. We have brought peace and order to 1,000,000 worlds. Our wisdom guides the path of civilization itself. Your wisdom, Sarah replied, looks a lot like tyranny from where I'm standing. Speaker Veltar stood from his throne. This is madness. No primitive species can survive outside the Council's protection. The galaxy is dangerous. There are hostile forces, pirates, rogue AI networks. Without us, you will be destroyed. Maybe, Sarah acknowledged, but we'll be destroyed as free beings, not as slaves. The metal being on another throne spoke in a voice like grinding gears. Your world has a population of 12 billion. Your technology is crude. Your military is insignificant. You have no allies, no experience in galactic warfare. Submit now, or watch your species burn. Dr. Harrison stepped forward. Ambassador, he whispered urgently. They're threatening genocide. I heard, Sarah replied without taking her eyes off the council. The Supreme Arbiter's form pulsed with energy. You have one final chance, human. Kneel now, swear the oath, and your species will be spared. Continue this defiance, and we will be forced to take action. Sarah looked up at the being of light, meeting what might have been its eyes. And what action would that be? Military intervention, the Arbiter said coldly. Our enforcement fleets will blockade your system. Your ships will be destroyed. Your orbital installations will be eliminated. Your people will suffer until they beg for the mercy of submission. The chamber was so quiet Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. Every alien eye was fixed on her. This was the moment. This was where every other species had broken and knelt. Instead, Sarah smiled. Not the diplomatic smile she had practiced for years, but something harder. Something that had been forged in the fires of human history, in the faces of tyrants who had learned to their cost that humans did not break easily. That, she said quietly, would be unfortunate. Unfortunate? Zephahai's crystal form blazed brighter. For whom? Sarah's smile grew wider. For you. The Supreme Arbiter's light flared with rage. You threaten us? You, a representative of a single, primitive world, threaten the Galactic Council? I don't threaten anyone, Sarah replied. I simply observe that every tyrant in human history has believed they were invincible, right up until the moment they weren't. She turned slightly to address not just the Council, but the entire chamber full of alien observers. You've ruled through fear for 5,000 years. You've convinced yourselves that might makes right, that submission is the natural order, but you've never faced a species like humanity. What makes you so special? The medal being demanded. Sarah's eyes returned to the Supreme Arbiter. We're the species that looked at kings and said no. We're the people who stared down empires and chose freedom over safety. We're the children of those who died rather than kneel. She paused, letting her words sink in. You think you can break us with threats? You think you can make us submit with force? You don't know humans very well. The Arbiter's form was now blazing so brightly that some of the alien observers were shielding their eyes. Your defiance ends now. Guards, arrest these criminals. The armored aliens who had escorted them moved forward, weapons appearing in their hands. Sarah didn't move. Neither did her team. I wouldn't, she said calmly. The guards paused, looking between her and the council. Why not? Veltar demanded. Sarah reached slowly into her diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small device. Because the moment you take hostile action against Earth's diplomatic mission, this beacon will signal our fleet. Your fleet? Zephai laughed, the sound like crystal chimes. What fleet? Our intelligence shows you have perhaps 200 warships, primitive vessels with no shielding, no advanced weaponry. Your intelligence, Sarah said, is about to be updated. She activated the beacon. A soft blue light pulsed 3 times, then went dark. There, Sarah said, tucking the device away. Admiral Torres now knows that diplomacy has failed. I wonder how long it will take your enforcement fleet to reach Earth. The Supreme Arbiter leaned forward. 3 days. And when they arrive, they will find a helpless world ready for conquest. Sarah's smile was now positively predatory. Admiral Torres doesn't think so. In fact, he's betting the Council fleet won't even make it past Jupiter. The chamber was silent again, but this time the silence felt different. Uncertain. You're bluffing, Veltar said, but his voice lacked confidence. Am I? Sarah asked. I guess we'll find out in 3 days. She turned to her team. I think our business here is concluded. Gentlemen, shall we return to our ship? Ambassador, the Supreme Arbiter called as they began to walk away. You are making a grave mistake. Sarah paused and looked back. The only mistake would be kneeling to you, and that's not going to happen. As they walked toward the chamber's exit, Sarah noticed something that filled her with hope. Some of the alien observers, the representatives of the junior species, were no longer looking at the ground. They were watching the humans leave with some Admiral Carlos Torres stood on the bridge of the Earth's Defiance, watching the tactical display with the calm expression of a man who had seen 40 years of military service. Around him, the bridge crew worked with the quiet efficiency that came from months of preparation. "Signal from Ambassador Chen confirmed, sir," reported Communications Officer Park. "Diplomacy has failed. The Council is mobilizing their enforcement fleet." Torres nodded. He had expected this outcome. In his experience, bullies rarely back down until someone bloodied their nose. "Time to contact? Council fleet will reach the outer system in approximately 60 hours, Lieutenant Commander Singh replied from the sensor station. "Size estimate 400 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts. Just as our intelligence predicted," Torres said. "And our response?" "All units are in position, Admiral," reported Captain Kumar from the tactical station. "Defense Grid Alpha is online. Sol Fortress Network shows ready status. Fleet units report ready for combat." Torres allowed himself a small smile. The Council thought they were dealing with a primitive species with 200 obsolete warships. They were about to learn the difference between what humans showed the galaxy and what humans actually possessed. "Admiral," Singh called out urgently. "Hyperspace emergence detected. Large formation bearing 27 Mark IV. "Here they come," Torres said. "All stations battle alert. Signal the fleet. Execute Plan Anvil." The Council enforcement fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, a display of military precision that had intimidated countless species. 400 warships arranged in a massive wedge, with the 3 dreadnoughts at the center like metal mountains bristling with weapons. On the bridge of the flagship Eternal Judgment, Fleet Admiral Keth Tar of the Council gazed at his tactical displays with satisfaction. The human system lay before them, defended by what appeared to be a handful of primitive stations and perhaps 50 ships. "Analysis complete, Fleet Admiral," reported his tactical officer. "The humans have positioned their fleet near their primary world. Standard defensive formation, no sign of advanced shielding or weapons." "As expected," Keth Tar replied. "Signal the human fleet. Standard terms, immediate surrender and submission or face destruction." The message was broadcast on all frequencies in a dozen languages. The response came quickly from the human flagship. "Council Fleet, this is Admiral Carlos Torres, commanding officer of the Sol Defense Force. You are ordered to leave the system immediately. This is your only warning." Keth Tar's 4 eyes blinked in what his species considered amusement. "Their only warning? Signal all ships, advance to attack formation. We will crush their fleet, then bombard their world until they beg for mercy." But as the Council fleet moved forward, something unexpected happened. The space around them began to light up. "Fleet Admiral," the tactical officer called out, his voice tight with confusion. "I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system." "Sources unknown." "Elaborate," Keth Tar demanded. "Sir, there are installations everywhere. Hidden installations. They're coming online all around us." On the tactical display, the seemingly empty space around them suddenly filled with contacts. Weapons platforms hidden in asteroid fields, defense stations masked by electromagnetic interference, fortress complexes built into moons and planetoids. The entire solar system was revealed to be one massive defensive network. "How many?" Keth Tar asked quietly. "Over 3,000 fixed installations, sir. And the ship contacts?" "Admiral, there aren't 50 human ships. There are 500. They were hiding behind sensor shadows and electronic camouflage." Keth Tar stared at the display. This was impossible. No primitive species possessed such technology. No primitive species built fortress systems. No primitive species. "Fleet Admiral," his communications officer interrupted. "The human admiral is transmitting again." "Put him on screen," Keth Tar ordered. Admiral Torres appeared on the view screen, standing calmly on what was clearly a military bridge. Behind him, Keth Tar could see displays showing the full scope of the human defenses. "Fleet Admiral Keth Tar," Torres said politely. "I believe we've met before. In the intelligence briefings your species provided to our mutual acquaintances. I'm afraid those briefings were somewhat incomplete. You have violated galactic law by concealing your true military capacity," Keth Tar said, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Have we?" Torres asked. "I don't recall agreeing to any laws that required us to show our full hand to potential enemies. You assumed we were primitive because we're new to the galaxy. That was your mistake." On his tactical display, Keth Tar watched as more human ships emerged from hiding, sleek vessels that looked nothing like the crude designs in the intelligence reports. Behind them, Massive orbital fortresses rotated to bring weapon arrays to bear. "You cannot hope to match the might of the Council," Kethtar said, but even to his own ears it sounded hollow. "Maybe not," Torres agreed. "But you're not facing the entire Council. You're facing humanity. In our home system, where we've been preparing for exactly this scenario since the day we learned the galaxy wasn't as friendly as we hoped." Torres paused, his expression hardening. "You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawing from this system. If you're still here after that, we'll assume you've chosen to fight." "You dare threaten the Council fleet?" Kethtar demanded. "I'm not threatening anyone," Torres replied. "I'm simply informing you of the consequences of your actions." 20 seconds. Kethtar looked at his tactical display. The humans had revealed a defensive network that rivaled anything the Council possessed. Their ships were clearly more advanced than the intelligence reports suggested. But retreat was unthinkable. The Council had never retreated, could never retreat. "All ships," he commanded. "Attack formation. Target the human flagship." 10 seconds, Torres said calmly. "Fire," Kethtar shouted. The Council fleet opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams and projectile weapons filled space with deadly light. For a moment it seemed as though the human defenses would be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of fire. Then the humans fired back. The Council had never experienced human warfare. In their 5,000 years of galactic dominance, they had fought species that followed the same basic principles: formation fighting, honor codes, predictable tactics. The humans followed none of these rules. Human ships scattered like a school of fish, abandoning formation to attack from impossible angles. They used the asteroids as cover, emerging to fire and disappearing again. Weapons platforms that had seemed inactive suddenly came to life, catching Council ships in crossfire. But worst of all were the tactics themselves. A human destroyer, badly damaged and apparently helpless, drifted toward a Council cruiser as if seeking aid. When the cruiser moved to capture it, the destroyer exploded, taking both ships with it. "Ramming attack," Kethtar's tactical officer shouted in horror. "They destroyed their own ship to take ours." "Barbaric," Kethtar muttered. But he was beginning to understand that barbaric might be more effective than civilized. Human fighters swarmed around Council dreadnoughts like angry insects, too small and fast to target effectively, but armed with weapons that could punch through heavy armor. Human ships worked in pairs and triads, covering each other with tactics that had no names in Council military doctrine. "Fleet Admiral," his sensor officer called out urgently. "The orbital fortresses are moving." Kethtar looked at his display in disbelief. The massive human fortresses, which he had assumed were fixed installations, were indeed moving. They had been mobile all along, disguised as asteroids and debris. Now they were repositioning to trap the Council fleet in a giant pincer movement. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving casualty reports. The Victorious Dawn has been destroyed. The Council's might is heavily damaged. 3 dreadnoughts are reporting critical damage." "How long have we been fighting?" Kethtar asked. 17 minutes, sir." 17 minutes. In 17 minutes, the humans had done what no enemy had done to a Council fleet in over 1,000 years. They had made it bleed. On the main screen, Admiral Torres reappeared. His uniform was still neat, his expression still calm. "Fleet Admiral," Torres said conversationally, "you've lost 43 ships. We've lost 7. Your dreadnought Eternal Glory has lost main power and is drifting. At your current rate of loss, your fleet will be destroyed within the hour." Kethtar said nothing. The numbers spoke for themselves. "I'm going to make you an offer," Torres continued. "One time only. Withdraw now and we'll let you leave. Stay and fight and we'll destroy every ship you have. Your choice." "The Council does not retreat," Kethtar said, but his voice was quiet. "The Council has never fought humans before," Torres replied. "There's no shame in learning from new experiences." Kethtar looked around his bridge. His officers were watching him, waiting for orders. Outside, the battle continued to rage, and the humans were winning. Not through superior numbers or better technology, but through sheer vicious creativity. "All ships," he said finally, "begin withdrawal to hyperspace." As the Council fleet limped away from the Sol system, Admiral Torres turned to his communications officer. "Signal all stations. Ceasefire." "Let them go, sir," Captain Kumar asked. "We could destroy them completely." "Yes." The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. For the first time in 5,000 years, The great chamber on Nexus Prime buzzed with uncertainty instead of confident authority. The 12 thrones, usually occupied by beings who spoke with absolute certainty, now held figures hunched in confusion and growing anger. Fleet Admiral Kethtar stood in the center of the chamber, his forearms trembling as he delivered his report. His uniform, once pristine, bore scorch marks from the battle. One of his ships had been damaged in the fighting, and he had barely escaped with his life. 43 ships lost, he said, his voice hollow. 3 dreadnoughts severely damaged. The victorious Dawn was completely destroyed. The humans, they fight like nothing we have ever encountered. The Supreme Arbiter's form blazed with furious light. How is this possible? Our intelligence indicated a primitive species with crude technology. Our intelligence was wrong, Kethtar replied bluntly. They have been preparing for war since first contact. Their entire solar system is a fortress. Hidden weapons platforms, mobile defense stations, ships disguised as asteroids. They turned their whole system into a trap. Speaker Veltar leaned forward on his throne. But their technology is more advanced than we believed, Kethtar interrupted. Their weapons cut through our shields like they weren't there. Their ships move in ways that violate every principle of civilized warfare. They use suicide attacks, ramming maneuvers, coordinated swarm tactics. The crystal being Zeph-High pulsed with agitated light. Suicide attacks, barbaric. No civilized species would sacrifice their own people. Tell that to the crew of the Council's might, Kethtar said grimly. A human destroyer, already damaged beyond repair, rammed straight into our engine section. Both ships were destroyed, but they took out our most powerful cruiser in the process. General Vex-High, the Council's supreme military commander, stood from his throne. His metallic form clinked as he moved. This is unacceptable. No primitive species can defeat a Council enforcement fleet. We will mobilize the full Grand Fleet, 5,000 ships. We will burn their world to ash. With respect, General, Kethtar said, I don't think that will work. The chamber fell silent. No one had ever contradicted General Vex-High before. Explain, the Supreme Arbiter demanded. Kethtar activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. It showed the battle from multiple angles recorded by his ship's sensors. The Council members watched in growing disbelief as human ships danced through their formations, striking from impossible angles and disappearing before return fire could reach them. They don't fight like we do, Kethtar explained. We use formation warfare, honor codes, predictable patterns. The humans have no honor codes. They attack without warning, retreat without shame, and use any tactic that gives them advantage. The display showed a human fighter squadron swarming around a Council dreadnought, moving too fast for the heavy weapons to track. Like insects attacking a giant, they stung repeatedly until the massive ship lost power and drifted helplessly. Watch this, Kethtar said, highlighting another section. A Council cruiser, thinking it had cornered a damaged human ship, moved in for the kill. At the last moment, 3 more human ships emerged from behind an asteroid, catching the cruiser in a devastating crossfire. They used deception as a primary weapon, Kethtar continued. Nothing is what it appears to be. No tactic is too underhanded. No sacrifice is too great if it serves their purpose. Council member Thelvas, an ancient being whose species had been among the first to join the Alliance, spoke in a voice like rustling leaves. In my people's history, we remember tales of such warriors, species that fought not for conquest but for survival. They were difficult to defeat. This is different, General Vex-High insisted. They are still just one species. One world. We have 1,000 member species. 1,000,000 worlds. We will overwhelm them with numbers, will we? Asked another Council member, Morthic the Wise. And at what cost? How many of our ships will we lose? How many of our people will die? And what happens to our other territories while our fleets are fighting humans? The chamber stirred uneasily. This was a consideration none of them had faced before. Kethtar activated another display. There's something else. During the battle, I detected transmissions from human ships. They were broadcasting on multiple frequencies, sending detailed combat footage to locations throughout the galaxy. The Supreme Arbiter's light flickered.
Meaning?
Meaning every species in the galaxy now has recordings of humans defeating a Council fleet. Word is already spreading. Our subject species are seeing that the Council can be beaten. As if summoned by his words, Guide Morthak hurried into the chamber, his robes flashing urgent red. Supreme Arbiter, we have reports from across the galaxy. Several junior member species are asking questions. What kind of questions? Veltar demanded. questions about the terms of their membership, questions about the necessity of monthly submission ceremonies. The Kethmori delegation has formally requested a review of their tribute obligations. The Zelthari have suspended their scheduled oath renewal pending clarification of galactic law. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Junior species didn't ask questions. They certainly didn't suspend ceremonies. And there's more, Morthak continued nervously. We're receiving requests from dozens of species for information about humans. They want to know about their government, their society, their military capabilities. Some are asking if they can send diplomatic missions to Earth. General Vexhi's metallic form rang like a struck bell. This ends now. We mobilize the Grand Fleet immediately. We crush the humans so thoroughly that no one will ever dare question Council authority again. And if we lose? Asked Thelvis quietly. The chamber fell silent again. It was a question none of them had ever had to consider. We won't lose, Vexhi said, but his voice lacked conviction. Fleet Admiral Kethtar, the Supreme Arbiter, said slowly. In your professional opinion, what would happen if we sent the Grand Fleet against the humans? Kethtar was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. Supreme Arbiter, the humans turned their home system into a fortress over the course of 3 years. They've had time to prepare, to study our tactics, to design counters for our strategies. If we attack with 5,000 ships, we might win, but we would lose thousands of vessels in the process. Tens of thousands of crew members would die. He paused, then continued grimly. And that assumes they don't have allies we don't know about, or hidden fleets in other systems, or weapons we haven't seen yet. The humans are clearly more capable than we believed. Much more capable. Unacceptable, Vexhi declared. The Council does not negotiate with primitives. They're not primitives, Kethtar replied. That's what we keep getting wrong. They may be new to the galaxy, but they're not primitive. Their technology is different from ours, but it's not inferior. Their tactics are unfamiliar, but they're devastatingly effective. Council member Yarthek, whose aquatic species communicated through color changes, flashed patterns of deep concern. If we cannot defeat them through force, what options remain? Blockade, suggested Veltar. Isolate their system. Cut off all trade. Eventually they will be forced to submit. To what end? Asked Morthek. They are clearly self-sufficient, and a blockade would require maintaining fleets in their region indefinitely. Fleets that could not be used elsewhere. Besides, Kethtar added, during the battle I observed several ships of unknown design assisting the humans. When questioned, the humans claimed they were independent merchants seeking to trade, but their tactics suggested military training. The Supreme Arbiter's light dimmed. Unknown ships? It's possible the humans have been building alliances we don't know about, Kethtar said. Species that have remained outside Council space waiting for an opportunity. If we push too hard, we might find ourselves facing more than just humanity. The chamber was quiet now, the weight of the situation settling on them all. For 5,000 years, the Council had maintained peace through overwhelming force. The threat of destruction had kept every species in line. But now, for the first time, their force had been challenged and found wanting. There is another consideration, Thelvis said softly, what the humans said during their defiance, about looking at kings and choosing freedom, about being the children of those who died rather than kneel. These are not the words of a species that will submit no matter what force we bring against them. What are you suggesting? The Supreme Arbiter asked. I am suggesting, Thelvis said carefully, that perhaps the age of submission is ending. Perhaps the humans represent something new in the galaxy, something we have never encountered before. Revolution, General Vexhi said, the word falling like a stone into still water. Change, Thelvis corrected. Evolution, growth. The galaxy is not the same as it was 5,000 years ago. Perhaps our methods must change as well. The Supreme Arbiter considered this, its form pulsing with thought. Around the chamber, the other council members waited. Outside, the galaxy watched and wondered. For the first time in millennia, the future was uncertain. And uncertainty, they were learning, was a dangerous thing for an empire built on fear. We will reconvene tomorrow, the Supreme Arbiter finally announced. All options will be considered, including negotiations. The word hung in the air like for 3 months after the Battle of Sol. Ambassador Sarah Chen returned to Nexus Prime. But this time, everything was different. The same crystal ship met her at the edge of the system, but the greeting was formal rather than commanding. The same docking bay received her vessel, but she was met by a delegation of equals rather than guards. And when she walked through the corridors of the diplomatic station, the alien representatives she passed no longer kept their eyes on the ground. Guide Morthak waited for her, but his robes were different, simpler, less ornate. The symbols of rank and authority had been replaced by something that looked almost like a diplomatic uniform. "Ambassador Chen," he said, offering what might have been a bow between equals. "The council awaits your presence." "Not my submission?" Sarah asked with a slight smile. "No," Morthak replied, and Sarah could have sworn she heard relief in his voice. "Your presence." They walked through corridors that seemed somehow brighter than before. The moving pictures on the walls had changed too. Instead of endless images of species kneeling before the council thrones, Sarah saw scenes of cooperation, trade, and cultural exchange. The message was different now. This was how things could be done. The great chamber had been transformed. The 12 thrones still dominated the far end, but they had been lowered, brought down from their mountain of metal and crystal to something that resembled a meeting room. Around the chamber, the balconies that had once held observing aliens were now filled with diplomatic delegations, and none of them looked defeated anymore. But the most significant change was in the center of the chamber. The golden circle of judgment with its worn smooth floor was gone. In its place stood a round table large enough for dozens of representatives. As Sarah and her team entered, she was amazed to see the other delegates rising to their feet. Not in submission, but in greeting. The bird-like Kethmori delegation nodded their heads respectfully. The aquatic Yarthek flashed colors of welcome. Even species she didn't recognize were standing as equals to greet her arrival. At the table, 12 chairs had been arranged in a circle rather than the hierarchical arrangement of thrones. The council members sat in these chairs, and for the first time, Sarah could see them clearly as individuals rather than remote figures of power. The Supreme Arbiter was still a being of shifting light, but its glow was warmer now, less intimidating. When it spoke, its voice was conversational rather than commanding. "Ambassador Chen," it said, "we welcome you to what we hope will be the first meeting of a new kind of galactic alliance." Sarah took her seat at the table, noting that her chair was identical to those of the council members. "What kind of alliance did you have in mind?" Speaker Veltar, his blue skin no longer seeming cold, leaned forward. "An alliance of equals. A federation where no species kneels to another, where decisions are made through consensus rather than decree." "What brought about this change?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. General Vexhai, his metallic form somehow more flexible than before, answered. "You did. When you refused to kneel, when your people fought back, you showed the galaxy something that had been forgotten. That strength comes not from domination, but from the willingness to stand for what you believe." Council member Thelvas rustled agreement. "For 5,000 years we maintained order through fear. But order built on fear is not true order. It is merely the absence of open resistance. And resistance," added Zeph-Hai, the crystal being's light pulsing thoughtfully, "is exactly what we got once people realized the council could be challenged." Sarah looked around the chamber. "How many species have withdrawn from the old agreements?" "Withdrawn is not the right word," the Supreme Arbiter replied. "Renegotiated would be more accurate. In the 3 months since your defiance, we have been in constant negotiation with our member species. Many wanted to know why they had never been offered the choice you demanded, why submission was required rather than partnership." Morthek, whose species had been known for their wisdom, spoke up. "The truth is, Ambassador, we had become prisoners of our own system. The Council began as a mutual defense alliance, species working together for common benefit. But over the millennia, it became something else. A hierarchy with us at the top and everyone else beneath. What changed your minds?" Dr. Harrison asked from beside Sarah. "Your example," Veltar replied simply, "and the examples that followed. When the Kethmori delegation announced they were suspending their tribute payments, we threatened sanctions. They replied that they had been in contact with your Admiral Torres, who had offered to share defensive technologies. Suddenly our threats seemed less effective." General Vexhai's form clinked as he shifted. "Within weeks, we had received similar messages from dozens of species. They weren't rebelling against the Council, but they were demanding to be treated as partners rather than subjects." "And you agreed?" Lieutenant Rodriguez asked. "We adapted," the Supreme Arbiter corrected, "because the alternative was the collapse of everything we had built." Better a voluntary alliance of equals than a forced empire of slaves. Sarah nodded slowly. And what does this new alliance look like? Councilmember Yarthek flashed colors as he spoke. Each species maintains its sovereignty. No one is required to kneel or swear oaths of subservience. Decisions affecting the alliance are made by consensus, with each species having a voice proportional to its contribution and stake in the outcome. Military forces remain under local control, General Vexhai added. The alliance maintains a joint fleet for common defense, but no single species can use it to threaten another member. Most importantly, Thelvas said, membership is voluntary. Species can leave if they choose. They can join if they meet the basic requirements of peaceful intent and respect for other species' rights. Sarah felt a smile spreading across her face. It sounds like you've reinvented democracy on a galactic scale. We've learned from human history, Morthek admitted. Your species has experimented with many forms of government. Some worked better than others, but the best seemed to involve the consent of the governed. And what about enforcement? Dr. Harrison asked. How do you handle disputes? Arbitration, mediation, economic pressure, Zevhai replied. Violence is the last resort, not the first. We've discovered that most conflicts can be resolved when all parties feel they have a fair voice in the process. The Supreme Arbiter's light shifted to warmer colors. We would like humanity to join this new federation, not as a junior member forced to submit, but as a founding partner in creating something better than what came before. Sarah looked around the table at beings who had once demanded her submission and now offered partnership. What would membership require? Mutual defense, shared technology exchange within agreed parameters, diplomatic cooperation, Veltar listed. No tribute, no submission ceremonies, no oath of subservience. Simply the agreement to work together for the common good. And if we refuse, Sarah asked, then you remain independent with our respect and our friendship, the Supreme Arbiter replied. The age of forcing species into alliances is over. Sarah felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. I'll need to consult with Earth's government, of course. Of course, Morthek agreed, though I suspect they will be interested in our other offer. Which is? General Vexhai's form straightened. We would like to invite human military advisors to work with our defense forces. Your tactics and strategies have proven educational. We have much to learn about warfare from a species that fights for freedom rather than conquest. Admiral Torres will be interested, Sarah replied with a grin. As the formal session continued, Sarah found herself amazed by the transformation. Species that had spent millennia in enforced submission were now participating as equals in galactic governance. The bird-like Kethmori were proposing trade agreements. The aquatic Yarthek were offering to share their advanced environmental technologies. Even species she had never heard of were contributing ideas and expertise. During a break in the proceedings, Morthek approached her privately. Ambassador, he said quietly, I wanted to thank you. For what? For showing us a better way. For refusing to kneel when every instinct told us you should. For proving that strength comes from standing up, not bowing down. Sarah looked around the chamber, where dozens of species were talking and planning as equals. I think you're giving us too much credit. We just did what humans always do when someone tries to make us submit. And what is that? Sarah's smile was gentle but firm. We said no. As the day wore on, the outlines of the new Galactic Federation took shape. It would be based on the principles that Ambassador Chen had stood for in this very chamber: equality, freedom, and the radical idea that no one should have to kneel to anyone else. When the session finally ended, the delegates didn't file out with heads bowed and shoulders slumped. Instead, they left talking excitedly about the future, about possibilities that had never existed before. Sarah was among the last to leave. As she reached the chamber's exit, she turned back for one final look. The golden circle where countless species had knelt in submission was gone forever. In its place, the round table stood as a symbol of something new,